Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last installment of Front Porch Talk. It's been a very busy Black History Month for History Alive, and we really appreciate all the support everybody's given us thus far, and we hope you'll enjoy today's interpretive presentation as well. Plenty good room, plenty good room, plenty good room in my Father's kingdom. Plenty good room, so choose your seat and sit down. Join me if you know it. Plenty good room, plenty good room, plenty good room in my Father's kingdom. Plenty good room, so choose your seat and sit down. I want to start by telling you that this is a historic church, but it's a living church with a wonderful congregation. And even though it is traditionally an African American church, its doors are open to everyone. And we are grateful for the fact that we can now all worship together. Amen. The history of Emanuel actually started on a front porch. You see, there was only one church in Portsmouth in 1772, and that was Portsmouth Parish. It stood and still stands on the corner of Court Street and High. It was an Anglican church. It was a Church of England. It was the King's Church. And so the Methodists started out as a prayer group of the Anglican Church. Now, in 1772, a man named Robert Williams, an itinerant Methodist minister, decided to preach a sermon at the waterfront over in Norfolk. He was not well received. In fact, the crowd that gathered to listen to him preach had turned into an angry mob, and it looked as though he might actually should be in fear for his life. And that's when a Portsmouth citizen, a prominent Portsmouth citizen named Isaac Luke, whisked him away, put him on a skiff, rowed him over here to Portsmouth, and invited him to preach unmolested from his front porch. Portsmouth citizens were more receptive to his message, both black and white. And soon, both blacks and whites were listening to what Williams had to say in an outbuilding behind Isaac Luke's home. Now, as I said, Williams was an itinerant Methodist preacher, and so he was ready to move on. But before he did, he made sure that he had arranged for the two congregations to meet in a warehouse at Norfolk Naval Shipyard, which at that time was Gosport Marine Yard. Now, these two congregations met in the same building, but they chose their own leadership, and they developed their own styles of worship. And part of that style of worship that they developed had to do with the hymns that they sang. And so the white Methodists sang more the hymns that they were familiar with from the Church of England. Whereas the African Methodist Society, their hymns were what we call and response. So if you could join me, I'm going to call and you're going to respond. So your response is going to be, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh my Lord, oh my Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord. That's that easy. Oh Lord, oh my Lord, oh Lord. Mary had a baby, oh Lord. Mary had a baby, oh my Lord. Mary had a baby, oh Lord. The people keep coming, but the train is gone. Called him Emanuel, oh Lord. Called him Emanuel, oh my Lord. Called him Emanuel, oh Lord. The people keep coming, but the train is gone. It was during this time, while they were worshiping in this warehouse, that a young a black man from Portsmouth named William Billy Flora joined the congregation. His name was William Flora, but they called him Billy. And Billy had been born free black. He had apprenticed at the age of 8 to a cart and wagon master. And when he had acquired enough skill and had saved enough money, he opened up his own livery stable on the corner of Middle Street and Queen. And he was quite successful there. But he was young and he was idealistic, and the last royal governor of Virginia had moved in with his troops, and Billy had heard about these patriots, and he was all excited and closed up shop, grabbed his trusty musket that he called Betsy, and headed over to Great Ridge. And he joined an all-white regiment under the command of Colonel William Woodford. And it was there, on a cold December morning in 1775, that William Billy Flora fought his way into the annals of American history.
It was a chilly morning in December of 1775. When I heard the drums beating reveille, I smiled. I smiled because I knew that a century would be replacing me. And after that century replaced me, I would be sitting by a warm fire with my blanket wrapped around me. And I would have my hand cupped around a large bowl of mush. I was cold. I was hungry. And I was tired. But I was a good soldier, and so I remained alert. But suddenly I heard a noise in the distance, and I peered up over the shingles that were protecting me. And I squinted, and I saw several figures in the pale light. What were they doing? How did they? The British were putting planks back down on the great bridge. They were down to the very last plank. They were planning a surprise attack. Dawn was about to break, and I had to do something soon. I had to think. I fired 2 warning shots to alert the other sentries that something was amiss. The British soldiers that were on the bridge retreated to formation. The Patriot sentries headed for the breastwork to warn the others, all except me. I stood my ground as an entire platoon of British soldiers approached. Miraculously, I was able to get off 8 shots before I retreated. Everyone must have thought me to be quite a fool, because after a few steps, I turned back as though I had forgotten something. But I remembered something. I snatched that last big plank from the bridge, dragged it behind me to the breastwork, leaned it against the wall, scurried over, and pulled it in behind me. And then I lowered myself. But that missing plank slowed the British advance. The attack was no longer a surprise, and it led to a complete slaughter of the British forces. The Patriots only suffered 1 minor injury. Battle after battle, I survived. I survived that horrible winter in Valley Porch, and I survived our magnificent victory at Yorktown. And I'm here to tell you that I was there for it all.
From that moment forward, Billy Flora was known as the hero of the Battle of Great Bridge, and he still is today. After the war, Billy reopened his livery. He expanded it to a cart and wagon business. He received 100 acres of land for his service. He became a land speculator, owned 2 homes in Portsmouth, and was a respected citizen, an entrepreneur with a stellar military record. So in 1812, when the British decided to come over again, Billy was ready. He closed up shop, he grabbed his musket, he went to enlist, and they told him he was too old. So what do you suppose Billy did then? He joined the Navy. He joined the Navy and served under the great Stephen Decatur. While Billy Flora fought for the noble ideals outlined in our nation's Declaration of Independence, at its founding, those ideals were not yet realized. In fact, the word hypocrisy may well have been written in blood across our nation's birth certificate by the enslaved and indigenous peoples of this great land. And so future members of this church emerged as leaders who would little by little work to make liberty, freedom, and equality a reality for all Americans, in particular African Americans here in Portsmouth. Not long after Billy joined the American Revolution, Portsmouth Methodists built their own chapel on South Street. Then, after the Revolution, they moved to a bigger building on Glasgow Street. There's a park there now called Glasgow Park. And years after, it had been almost 100 years now that Methodists had been here. And so the white population, white congregation, that was known as the Methodist Society, they decided that they wanted to build their own church on Dinwiddie Street. And that church still stands there today as Monumental Methodist Church. And that they would deed the other building completely to the African Methodist Society. And so that was the plan. But before that plan could come to fruition, the Nat Turner War occurred. And that resulted in laws that restricted education for blacks. No one could teach a free or enslaved black. And it didn't matter if you were white or you were black yourself, the penalties were stiff for doing that. And it also attacked religion, religious freedom for blacks, because now they could not have a black preacher. They could not even gather together for a prayer group or to worship without a white overseer. And so because the white congregation had not moved yet, the most logical thing to happen would be that until the new church was built, the two congregations would just worship together. And that's what they did. And then finally, the church was ready, and the church on Glasgow became known after that as the African Church. They chose as their white overseer a man named George Bain, my husband, and a banker. Now you might ask, why would you choose a banker to be the spiritual leader of your church? My husband asked the same question. But what they knew that others didn't was that what my husband lacked as a spiritual leader, he made up for as a servant leader. Because you see, he was a station master at that church on the Underground Railroad already. And he and I, since the Nat Turner Rebellion, had run a secret school there, teaching the black children, the black Methodist children, to read. And this was very important because we wanted them to be able to read their Bibles for themselves, because we knew that white planters in particular had a history of twisting the scripture up and of leaving whole passages out. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard she could not stand. Let my people go. And the Lord said, go down. Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. And you can understand why they left that passage out. My name is Eliza, and I was a member of the Methodist Society. Eliza Bain is my name, not to be confused with Eliza Baines, who was a member of the African Methodist Society and an important operative on the Underground Railroad here.
I suppose we did, Eliza, each in our own way. Allow me to introduce myself. Eliza Baines at your service. And service was my business. And yes, ma'am, it was. I plied my trade at the Crawford House, the most fashionable place in town. And I was the most fashionable woman working there, and the friendliest. That's the way you gather information, you know. Get folks comfortable, get them to talk about themselves. And before you know it, they've handed you the keys to the kingdom. Yeah. Sea captains were always coming and going at the hotel. They would need food, clean laundry, and conversation. I was that person that would give them the conversation. They would also need rest before setting sail again. I watched and I listened, and I engaged in conversations with the captains, the stewards, the crew members, and local citizens to find out which side of the fence they were on, which captains could be trusted, and which ones were in it just for the coin. I would memorize the schedules of the northbound ships to find out which vessels were the safest for stowaways who want to get up north to freedom. That was what I did. That was my purpose. Along the way, many of them died. That captain there, he would take on stowaways, but he was very unpleasant. Not at all a man for the cause. That one over there, he would take on stowaways, toss them up, box them up, and throw them overboard at the first sign of trouble. Lord have mercy. And that man there, Captain Fountain, Captain Albert Fountain, captain of the city of Richmond. That ship was a safe ship. I would do his laundry, and we would exchange information in the pockets of his trousers. He could be trusted at all times. Captain Fountain never lost a passenger.
Truth is, I've never been afraid of death. In fact, I reconciled long ago. I'll probably die doing this. So, when the mayor and a boarding party of slave hunters decided to board my vessel, I figured, today's the day. Well, they came on board and straight away they start spearing the cargo. Well, with no success, the mayor in his infinite wisdom decides to have them chop a hole in the deck of my ship. So they take an axe. Down they come, splinters, wood chips flying. It was comical. They're whacking a hole here, trying, not a hole, show for it, I might add. So, well, I quickly I did. So, if anybody's gonna put a hole in my ship, it'll be me, and I'll make quick work of it. So, I snatched that axe from the largest of them. Down I come on the deck. Wood chips start flying, now they're really flying. Down again I come. I said, Mayor, where would you like a hole, sir? Would you like one here? Just precisely where would you like a hole? Well, this crazy behavior of mine, combined with the fact that I now had an axe, frightened the daylights out of the mayor. When I saw it, I did. I saw fear in their faces. Well, the mayor and party, being all full of fear, they left my ship with nothing but their little $5 inspection fee. Now, I kept the axe. But most importantly, indeed, those 21 precious souls secreted away in the cargo hold. They made it to Philadelphia and found their freedom.
George and I were in Richmond when the yellow fever hit Portsmouth. We sent a letter offering our home to nurse the sick. We sent money. We sent supplies. But we didn't return until it was all over. He and I were very old. We'd had just been 2 more bodies for them to bury. The fever claimed the lives of 1/3 of the population in Portsmouth and Norfolk. Among them, Eliza Baines. The cause lost a valuable operative, and we a dear and treasured friend. But another member of this congregation, Henry Louis, took up the mantle, and so the railroad kept rolling. Henry, by the way, was known as Bluebeard. So there were a lot of tense moments and narrow escapes back then. But the one I remember the most was Clarissa Davis. Clarissa Davis and her 2 brothers were to board a ship headed north. And the brothers made it, but Clarissa was left behind. She was left behind to try and find a hiding place. You see, there was a $1,000 bounty on her head and on her brothers' heads. And so she had to act quickly and think quickly. And so finally, she found a home on North Street with a tiny little porch. And underneath the porch, there was a door that went underneath the porch. And she knew that the people that owned that house, that they could be trusted. And so that's where she hid for 75 days. She couldn't stand upright. The air was musty, no sunlight. Now, of course, eventually we discovered where she was, and so we were able to bring her food and water. And there were a couple of times when she tried unsuccessfully to escape. And then after 75 days, William Bagnall, who was an operative from Norfolk, also a banker, William arranged passage for her aboard Captain Fountain's ship. And he went to get her where she was and brought her men's clothing and instructed her, do not leave until it pours down rain. There's a torrential downpour expected tonight at about midnight. Don't leave until it happens. At 3 o'clock, as Providence would have it, right when the guard was changing, the perfect time to get to a ship, the torrential downpour came. Clarissa got to William Bagnall, he crated her up and delivered her to Menkins, the steward on board Captain Fountain's ship. And it was not long before she found herself across from William Still himself in Philadelphia. Her body was exhausted, but her spirit was in no way tired.
I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I started.
I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. Everybody want to join in?
I don't feel no it's hard.
I've come too far from where I started from. Come on, I can't hear you.
Nobody told me
The road would be easy. I don't believe he brought me this. One more time. I don't believe
he brought me
Once
this
again.
far.
I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me.
Now, my husband George's reputation was beyond repute. No one would dare accuse him of breaking the law without proof. But although no runaways were ever found in the African church, and the school was never discovered, it was burnt to the ground by what my husband called wicked hands.
Mr. George! Mr. George!
Slow down, son. What up?
I came running as soon as I heard. Mr. George, what we gonna do now? What we gonna do now?
What you mean what we're going to do? What we're going to do, we're going to build a new church.
Oh, Mr.
And we're going to build a better church in a better place.
Now, I know, Mr. George, they say we got the money, but see, as colored people, we can't own no property, Mr. George.
Look here. You sure can. I can. I can buy it, and I can deed it back over to the church, don't you see?
Well, look, now, if you need some help with the bill.
Look, let me tell you about it first.
Uh-huh.
I got a place. This place is better. It's right on the water.
Uh-huh.
Got better visibility for looking out. Can you see it in your mind?
I can see it.
All right. Now, that's what we're going to build. Okay? Just relax now. We got it under control. Like I said, y'all came by. Now you can raise the money. Give that money to me. I can deed it back over to the church after I buy it, don't you see?
Well, Mr. George, look, I know I'm only 14 years old, but I got, with a 5 o'clock shadow, but I got, Mr. George, I got a strong back, and I'm good at driving a nail or two now.
Now, hold on there just a minute. The congregation of this church got together and they decided since Jesus was crucified using nails, there will not be a single nail put in this building.
Not one nail?
Not one.
Okay, well, that's all well and good and everything. It's gonna save some money too.
Yeah.
But Mr. George, where we gonna get the other stuff from?
All right, look. I want you to look at it. I know where it is. There's a big stand of oak trees, you see?
I see it.
All right, we're gonna cut them down. We're gonna use that to frame it up with. We're gonna do all the framing with that wood from them oak trees. But we got a problem.
What's that?
A little bitty problem. It's just a little bitty problem. We need some brick. Now, where are we gonna get brick? You know anybody on the brickyard?
I'm looking at him.
You sure are, and I'm gonna donate all the brick that we need to get this thing built. Now, look here. Let's see if we can figure out how to burn a brick.
Mr. George.
Now, this church, he talked about the stand of oaks. This oak kneeling bench, the railing, was made from the oaks that he was talking about. These pillars were hand-hewn from oak. The benches, which you can see one in the back when you leave, everything pieced together without benefit of nail or glue. And I don't know if you noticed it when you came in the church, but if you see those two windows from the front, They're arched like the windows on the side. You can't tell from here. They're in the attic. What church would put stained glass windows in the attic? A church that needed a lookout. And so those windows are hidden by an optical illusion. You can see that part from the outside, but not from the inside. And so the attic became a hiding place. There's a hiding place behind the pulpit, a secret door. And so what man had meant for evil, God turned to good, because these enslaved and free blacks could build a perfect stop on the Underground Railroad. And what's more, a beautiful stop, because many of the African Americans here in Portsmouth from the very beginning worked at the shipyard. And you might think that they worked as laborers because they were enslaved, but they did not. They were craftsmen. And you can see the beauty of their work right here on these wonderful molded iron railings in the windows. The ceiling of the church, there was a pastor who went to Rome and sketched this from the cathedral ceiling and then came back and had it painted. So this church is a treasure because of the congregation within it, and also because of the workmanship of the building itself. Now, the concept of a happy slave, meaning that any human being would actually be happy to be in bondage, of course, is ridiculous. But the fact that some enslaved enjoyed a better circumstance than others, that could not be denied. And Jeffrey Wilson, the young 14-year-old man you just saw, found himself in such a favorable circumstance.
What a mighty God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. Angels bow before him. Heaven and earth adore him. What a mighty God we serve. Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Thomas Wilson. I was born in 1843. Now, I was born in 1843, and when this church was built, I was 14 years old. Yeah, can you imagine a 14-year-old as a freedom fighter, leading slaves to freedom at this stop-off on the Underground Railroad? I love this church immensely. It's where I got my start. It's where everything happened for me. Also, I attended this church, and there's still a plaque on this church that lets you know that I attended this church as a faithful member and 50 years as Sunday school superintendent. Now, you might ask me, what am I famous for? Well, there was a little thing called Colored Notes. Now, Colored Notes was a national publication, but it was limited only to the Portsmouth Star. The reason I said it was a national publication, because the way Colored Notes started, I would ask people from all over to give me dates of birth or dates of important things that happened into your life. The only way I was able to get this out was the Portsmouth Star. A man by the name of Norman Hamilton, who happened to be the editor at that time, allowed me to have Colored Notes in the paper, in the Portsmouth. Now, it was in the back of the paper. It was under the comic strips. It was right behind the one ad. But that publication of Colored Notes increased the circulation of that newspaper tenfold. Not only that, if you were to go and pick up one of the notes, see, I would have people to leave the notes at a pharmacy or maybe at a church. I would go and pick up the notes, and then I would publish it. Ida Barber's death in 1925 was also, it wasn't in any other paper other than Colored Notes. And I was so proud of the fact that I had done this. Then, later on in life, and I have to tell you this also, I was married, I had 4 wives. I outlived 4 wives. And I outlived 4 wives and 12 children who loved me. I had 5 by my first wife, and I had 7 by my first wife, and I had 1 by my wife Ann, and then I had 5 by my last wife. See, so many wives are almost forgotten. But I am so proud of this branch of Zion right here. It's unique in its building. Slaves and free blacks, members of monumental Methodists and the Methodist Society, put their blood, sweat, and tears into building this church. And you know what? No slave was ever found in this church. Now, at that time, this whole section was called Lincolnsville, and we could not receive mail here. We had 2 white gentlemen that had a post office box down at the post office. They would go and pick all of our mail up and bring all of our mail down here. And this also served as a post office. My name is Jeffrey Wilson, and I'm so proud of this church and this branch of Zion.
Jeffrey didn't find out that he was enslaved until he was 10 years old. Up to that point, he lived in his mother's house, which is just a couple blocks up on North Street. Then he went to live with the Grice family, who taught him against the law how to read and write. And because of them, in part, is why we have colored notes, this wonderful treasure. To have something written by someone who endured slavery, Reconstruction, all the way into the modern times in the 1920s, his perspective on life is remarkable. And so I would encourage you, if you ever have the opportunity, to read colored notes. Abolition fast became a cornerstone of Methodism, causing a split in 1844 between the Northern and Southern Methodists. Those who purchased or inherited the enslaved before converting to Methodism or inherited them afterward had legitimate concerns. According to some state laws, freeing a slave could mean them ending up on the auction block again and being resold. Some abolitionists would purchase enslaved people in a bad situation and then were forced by the law to keep them enslaved, if only on paper. And this was true of family members who purchased free blacks who purchased their family members out of slavery as well. So it created quite a dilemma for some. Such a dilemma was faced by a woman here in Portsmouth, a Methodist widow known as good old Miss Jane, who had inherited George Timo. George eventually became one of 6 black senators elected to the Virginia General Assembly during Reconstruction.
Good afternoon. It is my understanding that trafficking of human flesh still exists today. It is no longer legal in this country. It is abhorred everywhere by those who consider themselves civilized. Today, the atrocities that can occur when a person is powerlessly under the control of another are no longer hidden or denied. Swept under the rug, as you say. No one knows better than I those same atrocities occurred in all their horror during my day. My wife and daughter were subjected to them in ways that I will not here utter. But there were slaveholders here in Portsmouth who hid runaways, who were abolitionists, and some that were even operatives on the Underground Railroad. And so it was with good old Miss Jane. I do not believe that the light of God's Son ever looked upon a more generous, virtuous, and fair-minded Christian lady than Mistress Jane Thomas. Widowed twice, with 10 offspring to show for, Miss Jane knew such poverty that as a young boy, I would hear her weeping unconsolably about what she must do. She was often encouraged by her well-to-do sister to sell a few of those enslaved, mostly children, and use that money to enrich her life. But she swore an oath that as long as she drew breath, they would remain safe in her care, and she kept that promise until she fell into the arms of him from whom that breath was given. To understand why this was such a precious thing to keep these few enslaved in their present circumstance, you must understand that there were laws in Virginia that governed how the enslaved could be freed, and that there were perils that awaited freed enslaved, especially a newly freed child. That included the possibility of being kidnapped or resold. As for good old Miss Jane, the choice was to sell these precious souls to an uncertain fate for personal gain, or keep them with her to ensure their safety. If one can any way consider being enslaved a good thing or good fortune, it was not fortunate enough at this time. I was fortunate enough at this time to have belonged to good old Miss Jane. And when I was a man, and it was possible, she provided the opportunity for me to safely gain my emancipation by hiring me out to a vessel which she knew would carry me north, thereby providing me the means to secure my freedom, and I did escape and remained in New Bedford until the war's end. It was only then that my return to Portsmouth would afford me of any use to my dear family, as well as provide a way for me to serve the city of Portsmouth as a state senator. How much I was actually able to do or accomplish in that position is for others to judge. What I can say, that I fought the good fight, and no one can do more than that. Life for some of us is long, not because of the number of years we are left on this earth, but because of the events encompassed therein that cause us to live so many lives within a single lifetime. And so it was for me. Looking back on my life as an enslaved man, I truly believe this to be providential, that religion and music were among the few liberties granted to be enslaved. Our faith and our music carried us through the darkest times of history. It was the appearance of Methodism that sparked the conscience of whites, causing many of them to embrace the abolitionist cause and unite with enslaved and free blacks under one banner. It was Methodist women of faith like good old Miss Jane who found the courage to speak and act out of love rather than greed. It was the sweet sound of my guitar that brought me comfort when separated from those I held most dear. In the same way, the spirituals uplifted those in the fields and provided guidance if they journeyed north. Our faith and our music are the greatest expression of who we were, who we are, and who we will become.
Please tell me the hour of the night.
3 minutes to 12.
Watchman. Watchman.
Please tell me the hour of the night.
1 minute to 12.
Watchman. Watchman.
Please tell me the hour of the night.
It's 12 and freedom has come.
A devout Methodist, George Timo was no doubt on his knees during the original watch night, as well as others that followed. For those of you who are not familiar with this tradition, while others are out and about wearing pointed hats, blowing party horns, and drinking champagne, there are still traditional African American churches who spend New Year's Eve as their freed and enslaved ancestors did on December 31st, 1862, as they counted the minutes until Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation took effect. While enslaved here in Portsmouth, George Timo secretly taught himself to read. And in his later years, he donated property to build a school for the African American children of Portsmouth. But that was only the beginning of how Portsmouth's African Methodist Society, now known as Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, would influence education here in Portsmouth.
Good day, good day. How are you on this beautiful day? This is the day that the Lord has made, am I right? My name is Israel Charles Norcom. Now, I was born in 1856, the same year they burned down the African church. I was a child of war and a child of Reconstruction, of the Reconstruction era. Now, being raised with 9 siblings laid the groundwork for me to become a man. How my parents, John and Lucy, how they managed to raise us up right in this tumultuous times is still a marvel to me. It became my singular goal to make them proud. When the town of Edenton could no longer hold me, I attended prep school in Massachusetts. Now listen to the words I'm saying very well. I attended prep school in Massachusetts. I studied at Yale. Then I attended another prep school. Then I studied at Harvard. Then on to the nation's capital, where I majored in business at Howard. Then another prep school in Hampton and UVA. Now, I said I studied. At that time, coloreds were not allowed to attend Harvard or Yale. But with my academic achievements being so great, I was allowed to study at both of those universities. Now, prepared for anything, I taught for 2 years at Bedford County. Then I landed right here in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia. I was at Chestnut Street High School. I was only 22 years old. But at the age of 22, they hired me as a teacher and a principal. It was here that my life's work would begin and end, at the school and right here in this church. My wife and I, we purchased the home right down the street on Green Street, and we raised our children there. I served as this church's secretary of the trustee board for many, many years. And the people of this church, they served me in so many ways that I could not even quantify. This church is special. You see, Jim Crow and segregation, that meant, Jim Crow South meant that not only, it was more than simply not occupying the space with whites, whether in school or a bus. But that was the separate part. The equal part, that was left for us to figure out. But Emanuel had a handle on the equal part. They figured it out a long time ago. From the beginning, they noticed the value of their autonomy. And by joining with the African Methodist Episcopal denomination, they supported equality during worship. I supported that same thing. I tried to teach that to my students, and it became a part of my life also. Now, it was difficult for coloreds to find affordable insurance. So I started the Southern Aid Society. The Southern Aid Society was a way to help coloreds build and buy homes. It was the very first Black-owned and Black-operated insurance company in the whole nation. Then I became the secretary of the Building and Loan. You know, while the society had a motto, better schools, better health, better homes, and better farms. These goals, all of these goals, were intertwined, and education, the great equalizer, would be the key to unlock that door.
Two of Israel's former students, both members of this congregation, would return to Portsmouth to teach. The first, Ida Barber, eventually changed her focus to early childhood education, founding the Miller Day School, which still exists here today.
But they wanted more from me. That simply to be free, it was important to them that I made good use of my freedom. For them, schooling had been outlawed. And knowing this, I dreamt not only of learning, but of teaching. As soon as I was of age, they enrolled me in that Chestnut Street School. Their teachers like Mr. Norcom instilled in me a love of learning, and he opened my eyes to a world far beyond the close-knit neighborhood of Lincolnville. Before I knew it, I was headed to Philadelphia at the Institute for Colored Youth. I earned my teaching diploma, and I returned to Portsmouth determined to share all I knew. That same year, I was hired as a sewing teacher and found myself right back where I started, Chestnut Street School. My dream of becoming a teacher was fulfilled, but sometimes one dream leads to another. And so it was when I decided to take in 5 homeless orphans. Soon after that, I was approached by a widow who needed help caring for her children while she worked as a domestic. Of course, I agreed to take those children in. My dear sweet mother kept the infants and toddlers while the older children and I were at school. Eventually, My mother's health declined, and I hired an assistant. I was able to support my mother and the children on my small teaching salary. But I saw a greater need, and I longed to do more. So I called a meeting of my sewing circle, the Needle Guild of America, and the home of Mary Jones Davis. When I told them I wanted to open a school for all the children who had found their way into my care, they were so supportive. They offered to help me in whatever way they could. Yes, Millard Day Nursery. That's what I decided to call it. I named it in honor of one of my schoolmates in Philadelphia. Soon we were raising money to support the school and its children. We sold dinners, furniture, jewelry, and we even held bazaars. We never turned a child away, no matter our financial difficulties. And I always encouraged them to follow their dream.
As a child of Emanuel, I remember Mr. Norcom being so tall and distinguished looking. I suppose it was his height and sporting those signature sideburns that he had. It was very hard not to notice him, no matter what your age. He was my teacher and my principal when I attended the Chestnut Street School, and he encouraged me to always pursue my dream of being a teacher. When I returned to Portsmouth to teach, Mr. Norcom was still there at the Chestnut Street School. I think we thought he would be there forever. His passing was a shock to everyone and a great loss for the colored children attending Portsmouth public schools. And I believe a great loss to the city of Portsmouth as well. He sure would have been pleased to know that in just 4 years, they named the school after him. All I was wondering, what took him so long? Of course, I couldn't hold a candle to him. No one could. Still, there is one thing of which I am especially proud: the Parent-Teacher League. I started the first one in Virginia in 1927. And when it became known as the PTA, I was its first president and remained for 14 years. I would go on to teach at Portsmouth Public Schools for half a century. Now, I only retired from public school teaching. I still taught the beginners Sunday school, a class right here at Emanuel. You see, there were young parents here who remembered me as their teacher, and they all wanted their babies taught by Miss Clara. Yes, indeed. My only other passion was the Girls' Aid Society, which ministered to the sick and shut-in and the poor and needy. If there was a need in the church, we raised money for it. I remember one year we purchased pulpit chairs, these pulpit chairs right here, these pulpit chairs. And another year we purchased a china closet for use by those preparing communion. You know, my favorite hymn is "Give of Your Best to the Master." And in my life, it is what I've always tried to do. Give of the best to the Master. Give him the strength of your youth. Clad in salvation through armor, join in the battle for truth.
Emanuel's congregation also produced two famous entertainers, Cissy Aretta Jones, who was an opera singer, who was internationally known, and Ruth Brown, who was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as the Mother Queen of the blues. She also was synonymous with R&B and is also considered to be the mother of R&B. Now, the civil rights movement saw political activism by one particular member of this church that maybe some of you might be old enough to remember, James W. Holly III.
I was born in the house across the street. Yes, sir, born there and raised there, right in front of this church. I became involved in this church and the movements here. In other words, the church was built in Lincolnsville. It was the first middle-class African-American community that was within a community of Portsmouth, Virginia. But for decades, they raised beautiful children here. But for what happened is that the people lost Lincolnsville because Portsmouth City began dividing up the neighborhood. I became involved in the civil rights movement, and in fact, I met a great civil rights person named Dr. Martin Luther King. Yes, I entertained him at my boyhood house. You know, folks in Portsmouth remember me as a dentist and as a mayor. But you know what I wanted to be most known for was to help fight my people to gain equal rights here in Portsmouth, Virginia. In other words, citizens were able to go to libraries, go to hospitals, go to restaurants, and yes, even go to that golf course. But I had my colorful side. And I'm certain that most folks didn't realize that the Esquire magazine wanted to print an article about my style of clothing. Later on in life, I had an old jacket, an old burnt orange jacket that I wore, and they even joked me about that. Now, for those who visited my house in Cavalier Manor, well, they'll tell you that I had a swimming pool under my living room floor. It was one that, you know, with the play, they would slide apart. And it was almost like that one that you would see in A Wonderful Life with Jim Stewart. And even though I was mayor and all about town, in my home, my wife, Mary, was the queen. She hated the spotlight, but I loved the spotlight. And in my home, she was the master of hospitality, and everyone was welcome there. Now, if you would meet me at Roger Brown, I'll buy you a beer. If you saw me walking down the street, I'll ask you to join me, and I will be asking for two things. One, how much do you like Portsmouth? Or another, how much you didn't like Portsmouth? Because Portsmouth is for people.
Holly became and still remains the longest serving mayor in Portsmouth history. Today, under the leadership of Pastor Billy Hunter, repairs and technological improvements have been made to this building, and interest in sharing the history of this beautiful church has been rekindled. It will be interesting. It will be interesting to see what leaders in education, entertainment, and political leadership are produced by this congregation's emerging generation. And the people here at Emanuel are trying to ensure that with their scholarship fund. Part of your ticket will be donated to the scholarship fund here. And if any of you feel so led and have a little bit of extra change, there will be a basket in the back, and 100% of that will also go to the scholarship fund. And now we'd like to end our Front Porch Talk series with a special song that we've chosen as a parting gift for all of you. We really appreciate your support this month in all of our programs. I know a place, ain't nobody crying, ain't nobody worrying, ain't nobody facing. Come on, y'all, follow. Life is a race. Help me, I'll take you there. Help me now, I'll take you there. It's Portsmouth, y'all. I'll take you there. Help me, I'll take you there. 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 Help me now. I'll take you there. Swearing point. I'll take you there. Come on, I'll take you there. Yeah. I'll take you there. Jeffrey Wilson. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. I'll take you there. Where else? Come on down. Can we remember all that? Did we leave anybody out? Right in. Take you there. 25. Truck